as a hot spot for COVID in the last week or so. So we're being very careful here. Some of us are being very careful here. We see a lot of people that aren't, which is very frustrating. But I'm happy to host the meeting tonight. Wendy and Beth Ellen are tied up in a board meeting. So it's nice to see you all. And I've got with me Sheila Whittle. Sheila is our administrative coordinator, and she's based in the Houston area. And so she's going to be helping us with the technology tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila, and she's going to give us some instructions on Zoom and chatting and some of those things. So why don't you take it away, Sheila?
Sure. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Doing well. I'm just gonna, most of you I feel have been on here. Is anyone, they're the first time here on the Zoom? Okay. And I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Zoom right now. Just a few kind of etiquette reminders. The first thing, just we'll keep ourselves unmuted until it's time for the speaker who Gina's going to introduce, Scott, to present. And during the video, just make sure you keep yourself muted so we don't have that background noise. Please use the chat feature. I'll keep track of the questions, and then afterwards, Scott will hopefully be able to answer all of them for you. And that's at the bottom of your screen. Just chat if you want to introduce yourself, say where you are. It seems like a lot of you know each other, so that's really nice to see. And then finally, just toggle between speaker and gallery view. When Scott's speaking, or we're doing the dinner affirmation, or Gina's speaking, it's nice to have it speaker view so you can kind of see the main person who's speaking. Yep, and that's all.
Thank you, Sheila. And we've got Carol Buzolo with us tonight from the Sarasota area, and she's going to lead us in our dinner affirmation. And she's actually been a member for what, 9 years or so, Carol? So thank you so much for doing this for us.
It's an honor. As we share food, we share something of ourselves, and we honor each other. We recognize the powerful association of women to food, life, and nature in all cultures. We honor the importance of those. We also recognize the burdens they can bring. We remember the women about whom we've learned, the ones they strive to nurture, and the organizations that are trying to nurture them. By eating together, we remember and honor those women who also have favorite food and family recipes. And we express the hope that through our efforts, they may find more substance for their lives. May we be able to feast together someday.
Thank you, Carol. And then tonight we've got Scott Osborne. She's going to be sharing our grantee presentation. Scott, I've got a whole big bio on you. So
don't read it all, Gina. That's okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. So, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us?
So I would, no problem.
Okay.
Not all. I'm actually in Sarasota, Florida right now, but I'm a native New Yorker. I'm on the grant selection committee for Dining for Women. So I have that privilege, and I'm happy to talk about that or answer questions if people like. And I spent a lot of my life doing international development work. So I've lived in 7 different countries. Is probably how I got into Dining for Women, and I love that very much. And I'm a lawyer at one point by training. And I also do a lot of work with UN Women. We have a local chapter in Sarasota, Florida. So I get to keep my hands in both those.
Thank you, Scott. Okay. So
should we get started?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to put up my presentation. Everybody relax yourselves. We're going to East Africa. We have 2 East Africa programs. So if you want your East African food, your drinks, your chai, get yourselves all ready for that. And what happened to my screen share, my presentation? You're just going to bear with me 1 second here.
And I'm just going to take this moment to just remind you all to mute yourselves during the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, how's that look, Sheila? Yes, pretty good. All right, and actually, we're going to back up a few slides here. My apologies. So we're going to start with Cure Cervical Cancer from Kenya. You'll see these lovely ladies in Kenya. We're going to take a little tour of how cervical cancer is treated in a lot of East Africa. So let's get started. First, cervical cancer is 100% curable. 300,000 women die from it every year. Most of these women are from resource poor countries, or what we call low and middle income countries, primarily because they don't have adequate screening and they don't have adequate treatment. Many women are not aware of cervical cancer until they're symptomatic, which often is too late. Obviously here now in many countries, we already have vaccines. Those are not widely available. So this is still endemic in many low resource countries. The ages that they typically pick it up from women there is between 35 and 44. So most of these women are in childbearing years. So that has a huge impact on the family. And I know Carol and others, we probably have some medical people and we can talk more about some of the medical issues later if we want, but it really does affect the family because women are dying from it and they're in the early 40s, for example. Another thing I would say that in places like Kenya, cancer is still quite stigmatized. I noticed this, I lived in India many years. You know, it's really seen not as this thing that people get and it's a shame, but it is somewhat stigmatized. So that's an issue too. Women often don't want to go and get some sort of screening because obviously of what they might discover. So let me tell you a little bit about the organization. It was founded in 2013 by a woman physician, Patricia Gordon. She's a radiation oncologist. We really love, I'll tell you a couple of things we looked at with this organization because we do scrutinize organizations quite a bit. There's a lot of female leadership. We look for that. The executive director, many people on the board, including the founder. So that was very important for us. They had submitted an application in 2018. We do get a lot of repeat applications and we liked it then, but this one was even stronger. So we were really delighted to see them come back with this proposal. Also, too, they're not just in Kenya, they're in 9 countries, and they've got over 100 sustainable clinics just focusing on this. So they're kind of what we call a single purpose organization. One other thing that we loved, and we can talk about this a little bit later, most of the work that they do is absorbed by the local partners in 1 to 5 years. So they don't have staff there, they work through a local partner. And again, in terms of development principles, you know, that's really great if you can do it. You've got a local partner getting the information. So we are in Kenya. I'm sure all of you regular Dining for Women have seen a lot of Kenya proposals. You know where we are. Kenya still does have a pretty low life expectancy, 65 years. Population, the fertility rate still continues to be pretty high. A lot of refugees there. So we know we've got some issues. And Susan, I think it was, I apologize, we were talking about earlier a little bit about why we get so many proposals from Kenya. Kenya still has many issues that relate to what Dining for Women needs to address. So our partner for this project is in Kisumu, which you see is over kind of by Uganda, by Lake Victoria. Some of you may even have been to Kenya. And our partner is called KMET. You will see them and you'll meet them in the video that we're going to see later. KMET stands for the Kenya Medical Educational Trust. So what they do is just medical work. And again, we'll see some of their clinics in the photos that come up. We love that this one is driven entirely through the local partner. So it's training the local community health workers, it's training the health professionals, it's not training staff that are then gonna leave. And that's a real big strength. What they do is called See and Treat, and we'll look at See and Treat. That's how they address cervical cancer. I should say also that in some of our discussions and in the application, they work with men as well, especially on this, that they promote why the screening and treatment is important, because men are involved. Men are involved if women have enough money to go to a clinic. Should they go? Can they go? So very often culturally, you have to get men on board with this kind of thing. So sometimes that's very important. So here you see one of their clinics. They do a technique called See and Treat. If you're living in America or in the West, you probably had your pap smears with whatever regularity you get them. And, you know, that's how we do screening for paps. I don't know, somebody could probably say how long we've been doing those, but I think it's quite a while. For most of the world, that is not at all cost effective. Often the skills are not there. It's at least a 2-step process. You have to first go get the smear, then it goes to a lab, then you've got to go back if there are any abnormalities. That is not the most effective for women in places like Kenya. So what's called the See and Treat methodology was developed. It's highly cost effective. It's 90% effective. It's also not used just in Kenya. In the UK, it's been used since the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So what this is, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it basically uses a visual inspection of the cervix, and they spray an acetic acid solution, which is basically a vinegar solution, which reveals precancerous cells. You can put them under light and they're visible. And then the treatment to kill those cells is with either cryotherapy or something called thermal ablation. So it's cold or heat, and that can be done all at the same time. You wait a minute, you spray on this vinegar solution, wait a minute, and then it can be treated. And again, that takes care of it 90% of the time. Women are not yet symptomatic, so you've got to get them in before they're symptomatic. So when we all had in the grant selection committee, those of us who don't come from a medical background, we sort of said, what's this? You spray vinegar? Now tell us this thing again. And we had a great education. We looked it up, and amazingly, it's this really cost-effective, suitable, locally appropriate method. So that was a huge selling point for us. So this project, what we're expanding this program. So the local partner is already there, CCC is already there, but they said, hey, we want to reach more people. So we're training more master trainers, we're training healthcare workers and community health workers. We're also providing funds for these thermocoagulation treatment devices. And as you'll see in the video, those are heat treated, and it's much more effective and easier than the cold treatment, the cryotherapy, which requires these big gas tanks. But thermocoagulation uses something that's about as big as a cell phone. So it can be treated by battery, charged by a battery, and easy to use, easy to transport. So this is sort of the next step in treatment in the C in treatment methodology. The enhanced referral system is big because, again, you've basically got to get women in there before they're symptomatic. And, you know, many places, you're not necessarily going for some gynecological exam every year in the developing world. It just doesn't work that way. But getting the education out there and saying, hey, this is easy, it's not invasive, it's not painful, get screened. So the referral system is really important so that people are telling other people. That was a big one for us. Here, I'll tell you something about the budget. Again, much of this is training, it's personnel, it's equipment and supplies. For those of you who are not familiar, when COVID hit, Dining for Women reached out to all the grantees and said, hey, we realize your situation is very different. Do you need to adjust your budget? CCC was one of the ones who did come back and say they probably will. That's fine with us in DFW. It really permits them to do what they need to do because everybody's budget has changed, their circumstances have changed. So that's sort of a stay tuned for some changes. But again, they've got a very strong partner, and we're completely confident that they will be able to handle that. Changes and concerns. Yes, now in the time of COVID, fewer women seek preventative care. Like every place else, women are not going for treatments. They're not going for screenings where they might hear about this, so that's a concern. Staffing at all levels is an issue, and funding sources diminished the same way that people are seeing unemployment here, or nonprofits are struggling with fundraising. Obviously, we're seeing other organizations that are struggling with it too. So we're hoping to stay tuned and hope that this one develops well. I'll tell you a couple of other things and then happy to take some questions. Is what we really liked, as I said, the fact that it works through this local partner, and we researched the local partner. They've been established for a while. They work in a number of health clinics. The fact that we can really basically just be treating local staff and local partners, then they've got the knowledge. CCC can come and go, but they can turn it over completely to a local partner, and that's huge. The fact that this see and treat method is low cost, locally appropriate, easy to use, it's not high tech, but it's effective. So these were all just big win-win-wins for us on this one. You will also see in the video, and then I think we'll see that in a minute if I'm not mistaken, that the whole apparatus to do this comes in, they call it a suitcase, but it sort of looks like a first aid kit, those white things that, would come when you get a new car or something. They get this little kit, and that's got everything in it. So the suitability and the practicability is great. And by the way, the woman who is the 1-2-3 from left is Patricia Gordon. She's the founder of this and is really just focused on this topic. So let's show the video now. I will stop my share, correct? And somebody else will pop up the video. Oops, where's my here? I think Sheila or Gina, one of you has the video.
My name is Monica Ogutu. I'm the founding executive director of KIMET. KIMET is Kisumu Medical and Education Trust. And currently we are in partnership with the Cure Cervical Cancer. We are working with to ensure that we improve access to cervical cancer testing and treating in Kisumu County. Cervical cancer is a silent killer. It doesn't have signs. We know very well that you can diagnose early, you can detect early and treat, but most of the times it's not done. In Kisumu County, we don't have any pathologist. How would you do a pap smear where there's no pathologist? We don't even have the labs that can handle these tests. And the other thing is ignorance. Most people don't have the knowledge. Our partnership, which is a complete, comprehensive approach of fighting cervical cancer, a very unique model that is having services at the facility level, at the community level, training the providers, empowering them with the knowledge, the skills, and equipping the facilities, at the same time going to the community to create the demand. We started with 7 facilities. We have increased to 11 facilities, and we are continuing to increase. So after identifying the facilities, the first thing was to build the capacity of the health providers, starting with the champions, with the mentors, with the trainers. Then later on, planning with the trainers to now train the providers. After putting the services in the facilities, we realized that most communities don't know that these facilities offer the services. So see and treat goes beyond the facility. But for us to link these clinics and the community up to the household level, we have a cadre of providers we call community health volunteers. So we train them on the basic information packages, messages to go out there and meet the women. After the pilot, we realized that the facility approach is not enough. So we started outreaches. So we go outreach, and that is when now we realize that there's a huge number of women out there that need services, but they're now coming to the facilities. And that's why I'm saying again, with the thermal ablation, which is chargeable, we are able to charge it and get out there and do the services without waiting for them to come to us.
The beautiful thing of screening for cervical cancer early is because when it is identified early enough, treatment can be done. Once the cervix is visualized, then you would spray the vinegar into the cervix. After spraying the vinegar into the cervix, we'd wait for 1 minute. We have a timer, and we look at the cervix. And when there is any precancerous lesion, this can be seen by the naked eye. And when after reading the result from the cervix, then we can now know what to do from that time next. If there is a lesion, we know that we treat immediately. In fact, we don't even need to remove the speculum.
With the new grant, we look forward to improving what we have put in place. Our wish as a partner on the ground is to make sure that all facilities in Kisumu County are able not only to offer services, but also improve access to information. We are losing women every year, every day here in this county because they have reached us too late and they cannot afford. Every woman should have access to early detection and treatment. We don't want these statistics. 8 women are dying daily. Who are these 8 women? We are calling them by names, and we are going to the community to tell them this is what is killing our women. We need to break the silence on cervical cancer. We need to have services in the community. We need to equip our health providers and let everybody take this approach seriously. So I think together we can actually make a difference.
So did everybody see the little white box, what I call the see and treat suitcase? You've met the community health workers and the woman who's the head of KMET, and you can actually look them up. They have a cool website and they talk about other programs they do if you're interested in a local partner. Questions, comments, observations?
There's one earlier, let me put it up there for you.
Yes. Okay. So a number of recent grantees from Africa, and we were discussing this a little bit earlier. There's 2 big reasons. The first is the need. If you look at statistics about education levels, health levels, poverty levels for women, you're really going to see the vast majorities in Africa, which does not mean that there are not pockets of women in obviously poor situations in Latin America, India, South Asia, etc. But the vast majority of the numbers are still coming from Africa. So if you look at low and middle income countries, that's really where the bulk of the population is. So to some extent, we feel then that's an appropriate way of sending the resources. We need to go where the need is. So obviously we don't want all of the programs in Africa, but we need to go where the need is, and it's there. And it's a place where small amounts of money can make a huge difference. I mean, you can see what this does and how having this training, you know, these are not huge grants. So they go a really long way. They can really change lives in a way that's incredible. And obviously, you know, having those small amounts of money to make a big difference is one of the hallmarks of DFW. So I think in that sense, we feel good about having a lot from Africa. You know, I will also say that we get a lot of applications from Africa, and we tend to get more applications for obvious reasons from countries that have English as part of their languages. You know, we get fewer from the Spanish, we get fewer from West Africa, which would be Francophone. So we do tend to get more from East Africa, from India, from countries where you've got English fluency. Obviously, they aren't all from there. We have one coming up, I think, from the Congo or something. But, you know, they translate, they have English speakers, but as you might imagine, some countries tend to hear about us. And so therefore the word spreads and we get applications. But we feel really that it's, you know, correctly dispersed by going to Africa. Other thoughts, observations?
A question. Is dining for women only in the United States?
Chapters are only in the United States, yes. But
I mean, I know
Wendy
you
could
could
probably take that more. Yeah, chapters are only in the US. I mean, I will tell you something interesting that we discussed is this is low cost, it's effective. A number of us sat around and saying, so why do we have expensive pap smears in this country? You know, which I don't know when last time you saw, maybe those of you who know something about the health system, do you have any idea what that bill is like? Here you've got an inexpensive, easy to do method. Why do we have pap smears? I will leave that up to people who want to address the medical system, but you've got a low tech, pretty effective methodology. So pause
because
for
of
thought.
because of they don't like to do things that are cheaper, and the system here, you know, also maybe has a little factor into it. But yeah, it's really interesting when you see countries like that who can, you know, eradicate something like that when we're, you know, still doing pap smears. Very interesting.
Carol, you work in Honduras. You're a nurse. Do you know if they use this method there?
I don't know. I will have to find out. I have a nurse friend, so I will find out.
That would be interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like an obvious to spread, mm-hmm. So we'll have to do some research and see where it is and how widely it's used, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a great situation.
Yeah, we love this one. And as I said, they applied in 2018, and we do get a lot of repeat applications for good reason. And we give them feedback after each one. And you saw in one of the videos, you probably didn't recognize the executive director. You saw her in one of the videos, but this one was really strong. There was definitely a lot that really was a winner. So we were good. We felt good about this one.
Good, good.
Questions, or do you want to move on? Gina, Sheila, what do you think?
We can move on to the sustained grantee if no one else has any more questions. So do you want to just show the video, or you want to talk about it first, Scott?
No, no, let me talk about it first, and then we'll do the video. Yeah. So let me do that presentation. We're going to stay in East Africa. Let's see here. Pop up that one. Not yet. No, not yet.
Before you go there, I think there's one more question from Dorothy.
Sure. Oh, sure.
Is a woman more likely to get cervical cancer again, or what is that? I can't. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read my screen. Where's Dorothy?
Sorry, I don't see that here.
Dorothy, do you want to unmute and? Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, there you
go. I was just wondering if this treatment is effective enough that nothing needs to be done again, or are these women encouraged to have follow-up screening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do know they're encouraged to have follow-up screenings. I don't know the statistics about, if you've got precancerous cells, which is what this kills, how much more likely you are to have more precancerous cells, and do they keep treating? I do know the big picture is the overall prognosis is very strong. It isn't the kind of thing that, you're having, high mortality or something later. I don't know actually what, if it's likely that they would then have more lesions later if this does it for once. It's possible, but that did not come up in sort of the overall results that we saw, but I can't fully answer that.
I was just curious. Another thing that struck me about this program, I think it talks about the number of people indirectly affected being only twice the number affected. But when you think of women in their childbearing years raising children, it's probably more like 4 times as many people are affected by people getting treatment while they're before it's too late.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That one where they always are asked to estimate the indirect beneficiaries, and it can be a tough one. Exactly. How many people are affected? If a woman who's 37 with 4 children loses her life, for example. I mean, think about the ripple effects. But, and they do that. And I think this was based on the family size is what they usually base it upon, sort of. But yeah, the ripple effects are huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, so now I will try to pull up the next one. We go to Malawi. Everybody can see that, the Changu Changu Moto? Yes, thumbs up. Okay. Everybody's muted. I apologize. Does anybody remember this is the sustained grant. They were funded first in 2015. Does anybody remember what the Changu Changu Moto actually means? If, yeah, you think about that. How about that? Think about it. We'll take it up later. So this is in Malawi, Ripple, Africa. They were funded in 2015 for these fuel efficient cook stoves, which as you can see right there, this woman is using. Ripple Africa was founded in 2003. And they work on 3 things: healthcare, the environment, and education. The thing, sorry, about the fuel efficient cook stove was it really was designed to both combat deforestation, and we'll see that in some of the photos that come up, because inefficient cook stove use vast quantities of wood, and there's health consequences. Inefficient fuel stoves are bringing in smoke, usually in small rooms, you'll see, where women are inhaling it, children are usually with them. So it's also a health issue. It also saves time, and we'll get to that in a minute. So there's a little Malawi, right along the water. It's bordered by Zambia, Tanzania, Mozambique, beautiful, once very forested country, which is now becoming deforested. The average income is less than $1 a day. So even by Africa standards, as we were saying, you know, it's one of the poorest countries. So for many people, life has not changed radically in many, many, many years. You're still seeing some village populations, predominantly rural, living on very low cash incomes. So this is the traditional cook stove. It was sort of a 3-stone stove, which is common in many parts of Africa, many other countries as well. You know, it's very simple. You get stones, you shove wood under there, lots of smoke comes up, you cook your food. You can do it anywhere. Needless to say, this has some negative consequences. Women have to bring in firewood, sorry, not catch. They're cutting down wood. So they're bringing in firewood. It is predominantly women and girls, which is a phenomenal amount of time. And that's an opportunity cost for women to be doing other things, for girls to be doing other things. When women are really strapped, it's usually girls who are kept out of school to get firewood. So again, talk about ripple effects. There's a whole bunch of secondary effects because of firewood collection. As areas become deforested, women and girls have to go farther. It takes more time, and there's really a huge environmental cost to that as well. They estimate that each fire consumes about 3 large bundles of wood a week for cooking. So we know what the consequences are. Malawi, parts of Malawi look like this. A lot of Malawi always looked like this. And now a lot of Malawi is starting to look like this. So that's a pretty dramatic statement about what is happening. Obviously, it isn't all quite so dramatic, but deforestation is something we can all totally understand how it would affect things. You cannot cut down more wood than you're seeding and that you're restarting again. So in comes the cook stove. The traditional, much of the country was covered by forest at one time. It's estimated that forest covers 27% of the population, whereas once it covered almost all of the population. This gives you an example, though, this photo here, about the effects of the smoke. So obviously you've got people sitting around and you've always got small children around. It might be one thing to have that smoke once in a while, but to do that day in and day out has huge health consequences. So if you can get a cook stove that uses less wood, produces less smoke, not only are you helping the forest and the environment, but you're helping with the health as well. So this is the equipment required for the fuel efficient cook stove. All the materials are gathered by the families that are going to get the cook stoves. This particular project, because what we're doing is we're expanding the 2015 project with this sustained grant. This project affects 5,743 households. That's about 14,000 women. They are asked to gather these materials and then provided with instruction to make the cook stove. So here's basically how the design goes. Again, none of this is particularly hard. It's all easily teachable, but the 3-stone fire, the traditional one, has been used because it's traditional. That's what everyone has seen. That's what children have seen their mothers make. So that's what's done, you know? But again, this is very low technology. It's one of the reasons we really loved it in 2015 and then now for the sustained grant. It's easy for people to do and it's easy for them to maintain. It does not require expensive inputs. Once it's all made, you can see these handy dandy little holders. I don't know if they have an actual name for the pots. So it's a very nice, sustainable design. There it is, cooking. There's happy women. Reduces less smoke, uses less wood. 66% wood reduction is estimated. So this is an example of some of the villages where this expanded project is going. With the sustained grant, they're going to expand into new villages. There are reforestation projects going on there. So they've expanded into the communities which are already doing reforestation. So this is like a perfect win-win. They're already planting trees. Now we help provide these cook stoves. So that's really a beautiful win-win as far as we could tell. So again, they were funded first in 2015 for this. Now what we're doing is expanding. I will tell you that Referral Africa has been in very close touch with their local partners after COVID, just to update you a tiny bit. They produce this guide for people because, again, you're not just doing cook stoves, you're working with villages, you provide what's needed. So Referral Africa says, hey, we need to help educate people about COVID. So they produce these brochures and work to distribute them. Here you see people cutting up and distributing these materials to try to get the word out about what to do for prevention. Buckets and materials for water and hand washing were also distributed. So here you see some of the water sources where people have been practicing hand washing. So again, this isn't directly related to the cook stove, but it tells you a little bit about what our partner grantee is doing to really focus on what's critical for people at the moment. So they're retrofitting a pump here for hand washing station. And here's a woman with her happy cook stove. So that's Ripple Africa and Malawi. I know Carol has visited the project. She might be able to answer any questions if people have questions that they would like answered. And I will stop my share and we can have discussion or questions of anything anyone would like to talk about.
Do you want me to play the speaking first before you take questions?
Yes, play the video. Play the video. Thank you.
Welcome back to Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. I'm Kumbo. I work with Flip Africa. We have expanded our tree planting project and we are now working with women farmers in 2 other districts in Malawi. The women are growing a variety of trees for timber, firewood, and food trees.
Here we are at the woodlot of Sera. So in this woodlot, we have 2,000 blue gum. This pine tree is just 3 years old, and behind me is just 3 years old. And after 10 years, the owner will benefit a lot.
These trees will not only provide local firewood in the heavily deforested areas, but an income and independence for the women over the years to come. Previously, Ripple Africa has helped women in Katabe district to build simple, fuel-efficient Changu Moto cook stoves to replace their inefficient and dangerous 3-stone fires.
The Changu Moto has proved so popular. It saves firewood, cooks faster, is safer, and produces less smoke. Ruth here has been using hers for 4 years, and she loves it. We're excited to introduce this simple cook stove to our tree planting women and their neighbors in the Nzimba and Curable districts.
I'm Dora the Explorer. I'm the manager of Changu Moto. I'm Eliza Manda, coordinator of Changu Moto. We are going to show you how to construct Changu Moto.
With help from Dining for Women, 6,000 women over a 3-year period will benefit from having their own Changu Moto. In both Nzimba and Kodakra district, it is getting increasingly difficult for women to find and collect firewood. And as each Changu Moto serves about 100 bundles of firewood per year, it will really assist these women and give them more time and put less pressure on their local environment. The women will be taught to make and maintain the cook stoves and will be encouraged to help their neighbors to make their own. So, although as we say 6,000 women will benefit, we anticipate that up to 30,000 women will ultimately benefit from this grant.
Changu Moto, Changu Moto,
Did we learn last week that some chapter has made these? Whatever I want to say was Colorado or something? Gina, do you know? Or Sheila, do you know? Wendy? Isn't that right? Maybe Wendy.
There's a chapter in Asheville, North Carolina.
Thank you. I'll say just a little something that I didn't mention about maintenance because, you know, I first saw these and I thought, well, why couldn't villagers just spread this, you know, with themselves, this locally available materials? part of it is just cultural habit. Women use 3 stone fires because that's what they've always used, because most of us do everything we've always seen and what we've been taught. So some of it is really getting the ideas permeated enough, but Ripple Africa also helps teach maintenance because they do deteriorate. I mean, you know, you're in outdoor conditions. This is, you know, pretty simple mud and adobe structures. So they do teach them maintenance and repair and how to rebuild as needed. And that's important because women are encouraged to share and spread the technology, if you can call it technology, spread the methodology. And Ripple Africa helps and goes out and checks, make sure, are they maintaining it? Because that's really important for the long run. Carol, do you want to add anything? You've seen them.
If you ever get an opportunity or have an interest to go to one of these, our sites, it was just an absolutely fantastic 3 weeks that I did. And Ripple Africa is just incredible. Jeff, the owner or the founder, and his wife, Elizabeth, when I was there, it was a Saturday, they got up at like 7 in the morning and they didn't get home until 6 o'clock at night. And they were checking on their stoves in one town. And they also try to figure out what the savings in the hydrocarbon of the effects in the environment, and they get carbon credits for that. I mean, they're doing everything they can to help these people with healthier life and not deforest. They're just a fantastic organization. So if you ever get an opportunity, take advantage of it.
I was just looking up the stats for COVID for Malawi, and it's really very low.
It is very low.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know enough to say how much is a testing issue, and prevention may be very effective. But yeah, we talked about that at one point. I think in our chapter we discussed that. Yeah.
I mean, they've had less than 10 deaths in the entire country. So despite testing or not, people are not dying. They're not dying in the same percentage that they are in other countries from the disease.
It's still early. It's, you know, they did not contract that, you know, it came to them later. So they're definitely behind us, and their tracking mechanisms, I can't even fathom.
Right.
Tracking it. They have, most of the people that live there are under the age of 18. They have a very young population also, and that may be part of the factor.
There's actually been a lot of speculation about that because I follow the India statistics, and people are hoping, even though the numbers in India are much higher, they're hoping that they don't see the death rate that you did, for example, in Western Europe, because the population is so young. I mean, that's what a lot of people are watching in these countries, that, you know, countries with older populations have been devastated. So the hope still to, you know, we don't know, but the hope is that countries with populations that are so much younger will fare a little bit better, but we'll see.
That's why it's a little frightening to see the cases here that the age is going down for the people that are in ICU at Sarasota Memorial.
Yeah. So Chengo Chengo Moto, does anybody know what Chengo Chengo Moto is?
Fast fire.
Fast fire. Quick fire, yes.
Quick fire. Any other questions for Scott? Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And I did want to mention our goal of adding additional 300 recurring donors by November 1st. And Gaia Vaccine is going, if we meet our goal, is going to provide masks to vulnerable women in Mali. Just thank you. It's a very efficient way to process donations. It makes our revenue more predictable, especially in these crazy times. And I wanted to remind everybody that next week is a very special meeting where we will be having UNICEF representatives speaking and discussing the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. And that meeting is set for 7:30 Eastern Time next Thursday night. So I think that's all we have, unless anybody else has any other questions or comments. So good to see everyone's faces. Just wish I could reach out and touch you all.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Have a good night. Stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. We really appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carol, for leading us tonight as well. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.